Now, at 65, Nigeria's journey shows that communication has been central to nation building, and yet we still have issues around communication like misinformation and digital divides. They still remain. And that leads us to reflect on Nigeria at 65, the role of communication in national development. With us in the studio this morning is Dr. Chukwudi Anyanuka. He is a media and journalism lecturer. He is also the Publicity Secretary, Association of Communication Scholars and Professionals of Nigeria. Thank you so much for joining us. Good morning.
Yeah, good morning. Thank you for inviting me.
Good morning.
All right, now looking at Nigeria at 65 from independence in the past 65 years, how would you say that communication has evolved in Nigeria in terms of reach, technology, freedom, and function?
Okay, that's a multi-barreled question. But let me take it from here. Nigeria would not have become an independent nation had it not been for the role that communication played. Now, pre-independence, we had very vibrant newspapers. Of course, if you look at the history of communication, I mean, nobody needs to tell you that the print medium gave birth to other mediums. I mean, that was the first. Not that they necessarily gave birth to it, but then we had a very vibrant newspaper industry in Nigeria. That is the truth. All right. So we had newspapers that were run by Nnamdi Azikiwe. I don't know why the particular name of that. It will come back to me so that I'll narrate it. So now, take it up from that level. A lot of publicity, went into making Nigeria an independent state. Nigerians were sensitized. In fact, comparisons were made between the Western nations, particularly our colonizer, the British government at the time. The way they were misleading Nigeria. They were not leading Nigeria right as far as those who fought for independence. We had people like Nahoro too, who was an editor. So, looking at it from that angle, communication has played a very vital role in Nigeria's emergence and Nigeria's continued stay as a nation. So in 1960, when Nigeria became independent, of course before that time, we had the broadcasting services that came in. We had the radio, and the radio was government controlled. The newspaper was the only industry that had, independent practitioners. But as soon as the radio came, government had a stranglehold over it. So we had the radio, championing the ideologies or the ideals of the Nigerian nation as it was conceived at the time. Then this continued, of course, we eventually had a television station, which was the National Television Authority. Up till today, we still have it. We have the Federal Radio Corporation of Nigeria. It didn't start off as those names, definitely, but then we still have it. But today, we've had individual private broadcasters coming in. Now, I'm conceptualizing communication from the perspective of media, news media. So we need to understand that. But communication actually goes beyond that. Because communication, as defined by experts, it's a process that we engage in. If you look at the Laswellian malady, the Laswellian paradigm, rather. Now, Laswell provides us, with a context that we can look at communication and says, communication starts with a message. In fact, it starts with a source. So the source has intent of communicating something to a receiver. But then there's a process he has to go through. So he has to design the message. He has to also determine the channel that he's going to deploy to communicate that message based on the peculiarity of the source. And then even the message in itself passes through some noise. Because if there is noise interference, the receiver will not be able to decode that message appropriately. Now, why did I have to actually place this, on the platform? Nigeria's founding fathers, as we call them. So a lot of people have also said, no, Nigeria didn't really have founding fathers. Because Nigeria was originally designed, was supposed to be a British empire, or part of the British Empire. Nigeria was actually sold and bought by the British. Till today, the argument still persists because Western interests tend to dominate, the policies, or rather the the generation or articulation of policies by continuous governments over time. So that's the argument. Now, but if we agree that we had founding fathers, they had a vision for Nigeria. They had a vision for Nigeria to become a prosperous, independent, egalitarian nation. They had a vision for Nigeria to be very cohesive. We have different ethnic groups that bind us. A lot of people have also argued that Nigeria is really not a nation, but a country bordered by just geographical borders. You know what I mean? Just like if you look at Awolowo actually adumbrated it when he said that Nigeria is yet to become a nation, that Nigeria is not a nation. What makes a nation? A nation is made of people, just like we have diverse ethnic groups in Nigeria, with our individual cultures and values. So they come together and agree and say, oh, this is what we're going to make of this country. We are becoming one country. We are becoming one nation. But in our case, it's as if people were all foisted together by, an external force. It was not a decision that we took generally. So now the dream of the founding fathers, I've already articulated two of them, to make Nigeria a cohesive nation, to make us prosperous, egalitarian, to make us a great nation. Because when Nigeria was birthed in 1960, a lot of people had a lot of hope for Nigeria. That's why Nigeria consistently is being referred to as a giant of Africa. But that's doubtful. Because if we look at how much progress we've made, we'll begin to ask ourselves, are we really the giants of Africa? A country or a nation, if you like to use that term, a nation where its people are being driven away even from neighboring African countries. You see what's happening in Ghana. Ghana is saying Nigerians should go. So, and Nigeria used to wield a whole lot of influence. So how did communication play this role? Without communication, people will not know the vision of your nation. Your people will not understand, even within the country, they will not understand your ideals, your plans, your goals. They will not understand when policies or why policies are actually developed. Whether those policies would be in your interest or in the interest of the government that is actually framing those policies. So communication is very critical. Communication is important. There is no sector of an economy that you can look at and you eliminate communication from it that can progress, because people need to understand what's going on in the telecom sector, for instance, what is going on in the security sector, what is going on in the agricultural sector. So you need communication to be able to, drive home to the masses your goals, your intents, how you intend to also go about it. Now, looking at it, because that's why I said your question is quite multivariate. Now, if we trace it back from when Nigeria became the military interregnum in 1966, and then eventually we had successive military rulerships, and then eventually we transited to democracy. The radio and the television played a very critical role in merging Nigeria together, holding Nigeria as one country, though there was still unfairness. If you look at the creation of states, the allocation of, even up till today, you see that there is an imbalance. So we can agree that there is still, unfairness in the dealings. But take it up to today. Take it up to today. Information has been democratized on account of the emergence of internet and social media. So we have social media today. So citizens who never really had a voice can now express themselves very freely using the social media. Now, the same social media, the same digital media that has democratized information has also democratized misinformation. That is why we have a lot of fake news. We have, in fact, a lot of things going on that begin to ask us, that begin to, present us as a people who are not, who are, divided more than they were before. So there's no longer social cohesiveness. If you've been on Twitter, that is X today, and other social media platforms, you see that there appears to be some kind of conspiracy against a particular ethnic group. And the kind of rhetorics that are going on there, hateful speeches, we talk about hate speech. We've seen things of that nature where government has also tried to also clamp down on voices by introducing, in my view, this cybersecurity act. So the Cybersecurity Act, offenses that would have ordinarily been charged to court for defamation has now become criminal in nature, you know, and the idea behind it is just to repress the people. So Nigeria has gone a long way. I'm trying to see how I could answer this question in such a way, and communication plays a very, very vital role. And if Nigeria must, you know, forge beyond what it is today, communication is also very essential, because messages has to be designed to quell the agitation. And it's not just about designing messages, actions must follow also. It's not enough to say, oh, Nigerians, tighten your belt. I'm using this as an example. And we see you living a very luxurious life, flying, patronizing hospitals overseas, when you're saying we should patronize made in Nigeria products. So we see you, you know, flying in jets that are made by other nations. We see you also, you know, patronizing hospitals overseas. You know, how do we build our own? Nigerians want to see the example and live by it. So, in other words, messages designed for communication must also be followed up with the actions of those who designed it. There must be a congruency. It has to be congruent. What you're saying and what you're doing has to be congruent. Because even in communication, we have verbal and non-verbal communication.
Right, of course. Now, let's look at the barriers. What would you say are the limitations of communication when it comes to national development?
Limitations of communication when it comes to national development.
Before and now, let's focus it there.
Yes, there was a limitation in terms of reach. If we look at it from that perspective, radio had a minimal reach. People need to be able to afford the transistors or the radio sets. And then, of course, network was not also, as at that time, you know, it was the developmental stage of radio, particularly in our country. So reach was a problem. So the number of people who had access to hear directly from what government was saying were few compared to today. Today, with a smartphone, you know there is no limitation to what you can hear. You know, you could, both internationally and nationally. So the influence that the government media had at the time has been eroded. You understand? I mean, people have alternatives, so they mustn't listen to radio stations that are owned by government today. So they have the freedom to listen to private-owned stations. And it's not just the limitation in itself. You understand? It wasn't just domestic. It was also international in nature. It was very difficult to access. Even the costs constitute another limitation. At the time, people were made to pay taxes on radio ownership. At a time, even buying those radios were quite expensive to the people. You know, so these things were actually major limitations at the time. But government was able to use what we call community leaders. If you're familiar with the two-step flow theory, where somebody who's an opinion leader in the community says something and everybody believes him. But now it is also changing because people have access to direct information. So if I want to hear President Trump of the United States of America, for instance, based on something they said, so I could actually go on YouTube, Google it, you understand? I listen to him directly. If I want to hear the speech of Mr. President without actually passing through an analyst or an opinion leader, I can go on YouTube, you know, Google it and listen to his entire speech and even transcribe it and try to do my own personal analysis. So those limitations, of course, limitation also came with control. I've talked about in terms of accessibility. I've talked about that in terms of cost. Then I'm now speaking in terms of regulation, control. There was stringent regulation from the beginning. What were those regulations? Agencies were set up and they could clamp down on a newspaper because they felt that the newspaper was not pro-government. Same thing, we had the Nigerian Press Council. We have the National Broadcasting Commission that regulates your own industry. So there was a lot of control because people were limited to listening on to terrestrial radio and TV. Terrestrial in the sense that the digital form was not available at the time. We didn't have social media, all right? So government can decide, no, this station, we need to shut them down. Or they come up with laws. They will find you, try to control you, regiment you, you know. whip you into a particular line according to their design. So these were some of the controls. There are others, economic in nature. The operators of such radio and television stations and newspapers at the time also faced a lot of economic challenges. We also have to look at, in terms of violence against journalists. Remember my conceptualization of communication, and that's from that perspective. There was a lot of violence against journalists, as we still see today. Though we had the story about the Arise TV, but we've gotten better clarification that her death wasn't on account of how it was initially narrated. So up till now, we're yet to verify the true picture. But there's still violence against journalists today. But then we have citizens who now have access to the internet, who can express themselves, and you can see that those barriers are gradually being broken. We saw during the last administration where President Buhari had to put a ban on Twitter, now X. Nigerians actually bypassed it using the VPN, and Nigerians were still tweeting. But then it affected a whole lot of the economy, because there were people who were making their money just from Twitter at the time. So it also has its downside.
Now, what responsibilities do journalists and media houses have in nation building, and how well are they fulfilling them currently? Okay,
I think the best way to look at this is to look at Tom Bresenshall's elements of journalism. It is the responsibility of the journalist to be loyal, first of all, to the citizens and to stand for the truth. That is the primary essence of journalism. Loyalty to citizens means that the journalist unearths those activities, not just of government, please, because it's important to make this very clear, of even private citizens that tend to subvert the will of the people. Let me give you a classic example of what happened in 2023, though things are a bit different now because we saw a lot of citizen journalism. So I'd like to classify it on that, where, people were prevented from exercising their, franchise. They were not allowed to vote. We saw violations, we saw images of people who went in, carted away ballot boxes, We saw figures that were manipulated. So these are the things that journalists bring to fore. The citizens are also now playing that role. Because a nation cannot grow or cannot be built where such things are swept under the carpet, where illegality continues to remain, the norm. Where a government can stand up one day and decide that it will spend 330 billion naira to distribute 25,000 naira to 8 million poor families. I hope you're following what I'm saying.
Of course.
All right? So there has to be some kind of transparency. So they throw the light on issues of that nature and say, this is what government has claimed to do. Government has claimed that it spent so much amount building this road or executing this project. But from our own investigation, from our own findings, this is actually the true picture. It is in doubt that if we look at what is on ground, that we cannot say it is commensurate to what government has claimed. So the journalist plays like a liaison role, not really liaison, but is like the advocate for the people. So he's in between what is happening between very influential and then government people and then the people, the masses itself. Okay? So it makes some kind of interpretation. You can also look at it from the perspective of the 5 rules of journalism. I think it was Laswell too and Charles Wright, the functional approach to mass communication or to the media, where they say that the media plays 5 major functions in society, which is number 1, surveillance. So this is what happens. So you report it like exactly as it is. Then the second role is the correlation function. Correlation, that is, the journalist offers interpretation. So something happens. There is, for instance, when President Bola Tinubu, on his inauguration day on May 29, 2023, said subsidy is gone. All right. Now, the journalist will now give you an interpretation. Look at the implication of this statement or this policy by this government. If subsidy is gone, it means that you should be ready to pay more for transportation. It means you should be ready to, for your earnings, your earnings will be strangulated more. It means that you should be ready to pay more for food. You must be ready to also face a lot of difficulties. So correlation goes on. The third role the journalist plays is that is of transmission of culture. It transmits the culture from what happened in the past to the future, to the present, and of course to the future. So transmission of culture. So that way we know, oh, this is how our fathers did it, performed our own thing. So history is just like history, complicating what happened. This is how we got our independence. This is how the military government governed us. This is the experiences we had. The idea of transmitting your culture is so that you can be better equipped to do things better in the future. Then, of course, the fourth one is mobilization and sensitization, which is a very, very important role. Mobilization of citizens. So if there's something government is doing and is not able to mobilize citizens or to sensitize citizens, then that project or that idea or ideal will not work. And then finally, of course, entertainment. And that brings me to how Nollywood has also been a major contributory industry to this government. Not just to this government. Nollywood and the music industry, they are doing Nigeria proud. Nigeria's music has not had it so good. We've seen a lot of our artists who have become billionaires overnight. We've seen streaming platforms, streaming Nigerian music. For those of you who are quite young, I think you understand this even much better than I do. So that is what journalism does. Well,
all right. Thank you very much, Dr. Chukwudi Anyanuka. I hope I got that correctly.
Yes, you did.
All right. Thank you for that opinion.
Thank you.
So now we have come to the end of this conversation, and we just spoke about publicity. We just spoke about the role of communication in national development, and we just spoke to the Publicity Secretariat Association of Communication Scholars and Professionals of Nigeria. And now over to you, Uche.
Now, that was quite an insightful conversation we had with Dr. Anyanuka. Now, we'll be bringing global news up next with Christopher Lele, and make sure to stay tuned as the special broadcast for the Independence Day celebration comes right after the news.